Hi there, I'm Phil the Practical Gardener. This particular tip is 7.6. How to make and then look after a slat-sided bin that would be suitable for composting garden waste such as weeds and grass clippings and leaves. In a lot of cases I don't actually see the need for a compost bin or heap at all. In tip 7.8 I recommend sheet composting. Wherever possible, simply spread organic waste over the soil surface. You will maximise the benefits. I also have another tip, 7.6, composting kitchen scraps. The need to have a different system for these materials and the way the composting is treated is quite different. So be sure to watch 7.6 when it becomes available. Being subscribed and pushing the like button are the best ways of assuring that you won't miss out. Also on my website link below I do show the full schedule of tips and update them when they become available. There are several situations where it is best to compost garden waste rather than just simply spreading it over the garden surface. Firstly, quantity. When you have a large amount of fresh organic material at one time, for example trimming a hedge, clearing a neglected area or even mowing the lawns, these can be hard to manage on the garden situation. I sometimes sweep the leaves from my gutter along my streets. These are suitable for a compost bin. Bulky items. You might feel that large items such as small branches or palm fronds would ruin the appearance of your ornamental garden or overwhelm small plants. Type of material. In the warm, dry or windy seasons you can employ the chop and drop method for annual weeds. However, in cold damp winter situations these would simply regrow. Composting is the simplest way of dealing with them. A fully enclosed bin proof against rodent or flies isn't needed for bulky garden materials, and also it wouldn't be able to cope with the quantity that you have available. Remembering also that these materials are slower to compost than kitchen waste, largely because they have a higher level of carbon relative to nitrogen. So in these situations the larger bin is needed. Suggestions include position. Choose a shady out of the way place with good access. Place the bin directly onto the soil to enable access by microorganisms and earthworms. As my soil is fairly heavy, I do have it slightly elevated. By sitting the bin or bins directly on the soil and keeping it in one place means that soil organisms and compost-friendly earthworms will naturally find their way into your bin. I've never seen the need for a fancy compost starter or accelerator. Size. About 1.1 metre or 3 by 3 foot sides are suitable with a similar height. This will accommodate most of the bulk material produced in an urban garden. In a larger garden, 2 bins may be constructed side by side, as I have here. One for adding fresh material, the other for completing the process and removing the finished compost. Construction. 100 by 100 millimetre or 4 by 4 inch wooden support posts and 150 by 50 6x1 rails are suitable or similar. 3 sides can be fixed to the posts, but the entrance area should be removable, either by installing a simple gate or by having separate slats, as I have here. This enables removal of the finished compost. I prefer pressure treated timber. I know that a lot of gardeners are scared of the chemicals, but my understanding is that with modern treatments there won't be any leaching of chemicals into the soil. There are relatively durable types of wood available. However, the microorganisms that work on your compost will naturally work hard on your timber if it gets a chance, so you will most certainly only get a few years of useful life before you will need to replace the wood, no matter what timber you use if it's not treated. If you're a dedicated organic grower then you won't accept that, but remember, I'm Phil the Practical Gardener. These bins have been here for over 10 years and haven't deteriorated in the slightest. Materials. Wire netting sides can be suitable. I have seen this done. However, it can be difficult to free up the material from the openings in the netting. So I'm not a great fan of using netting. Another possibility, and it's a more realistic one, is using single-use disposable pallets, which are readily available from hardware stores and factories. All you need to do is stand 4 of them in a square, and you don't even really need to put in any posts because you can simply tie the corners to each other. Now you should leave an opening, so that is to say simply latch or loosely tie one of the pallets so that it can be opened or closed to enable access into the bin. I would say single-use pallets will only last a few years. They're not a durable timber. However, if you use the simple construction method, then it is quite a practical way of operating. I'm sorry, I don't actually have any images of pallet-made compost bins at present. However, I have seen a number of them and they certainly seem to work fine. They look fairly similar to this here. Cover. It may pay to put a cover of tarpaulin, plywood or old sheets of corrugated steel over the top of the bin to shed water off. Otherwise, rain can leach the nutrients out and make the contents soggy and anaerobic. Although I do cover my compost at times, particularly over winter, for much of the year I don't bother. The woody or brown materials are slow to break down and can dry out, and may benefit from natural rainfall or even the occasional hosing. If there are plenty of greens, such as fresh weeds or grass clippings, the accelerated composting process will actually produce its own water. One reason that I don't usually cover the heap comes down to practicality. It makes it easier to just bring the materials and throw them in if I don't keep having to remove the cover. So the raw feedstock that you might include in your compost bin can include weeds. Annual weeds are fine to compost. Avoid including perennial weeds that might regrow in the bin. I do have tips in section 11 for dealing with different types of weeds. As mentioned earlier, I don't worry too much about weed seeds. My gardening system is a weed management rather than a weed elimination one. Grass clippings, these are excellent for encouraging the composting process. If you add large material at once, mix it with the other ingredients using a garden fork or pitchfork, otherwise it can be prone to anaerobic decomposition or breed flies. Clippings, these can include hedge trimmings and other prunings. Larger branches up to 25 millimeters, 1 inch in diameter, should be pruned to around 20 to 30 centimeters or 8 to 12 inches in length. This will allow access of microorganisms that will facilitate the composting process. It may pay to avoid stems of thorny shrubs such as roses, as these can be durable and a hazard to hands if they survive the composting. Management of the composting process is quite simple. Adding materials in layers is fine. Generally the organisms will do the mixing for you. If you have a thick layer of one kind, you can mix the material with a pitchfork or similar. This process also allows aeration, which will speed up decomposition. Whatever management you use, the materials will take longer to break down than with the kitchen waste system, as described under tip 7.6. However, gardening is all about teaching us patience, isn't it? I don't actually add lime, as recommended by some practitioners, to my compost. I've never really seen the need. It seems to compost just fine, and some researchers have found that there can be issues. It's not necessarily beneficial, so I don't bother with that. When the bin is full, or you feel the material at the bottom is getting to the final stage, swap to the other bin. If you want to remove the contents of the bin from the bottom, you can always fork undecomposed material at the top of the bin into the second bin and then excavate the finished compost. Well, I think that's everything for this tip. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and also like this tip so that you will get to see the other tips as they become available.